Okay, now we're going to bring our modeled facial design and head into the software called Mudbox for smoothing purposes. And there's a lot of other things that Mudbox can do, but just for this lesson, I'm going to show you just kind of the basic working functions of Mudbox and definitely how to take advantage of the smoothing properties. So right now, looking at this, if we look at our head in comparison to our grid, it's going to be best using 3ds Max to scale any object you have relatively large before we import it into Mudbox for smoothing purposes, from what I've discovered. So I'm going to go ahead and just use the scale tool, or hit R on your keyboard. And we're going to scale this up pretty large, okay? And I'm going to scale it probably about that big. If you notice, here's the size of my grid. In reference to, I'm going to use the move tool and just bring it on down onto the grid, like so. Might go a little bit larger, actually. It's got to be pretty big for Mudbox to work. Okay. And with this object selected, this is currently box 001. That's fine. We could rename it head if we wanted to. Just name it head under the modified panel. And I'm going to select it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Max symbol up top, and I'm going to come down. I'm going to say Export. I'm going to say Export Selected. This works best from 3ds Max. You can take advantage of doing the Send To directly into Mudbox, but what I've discovered just using 3ds Max, I've done it with Maya Send To. Yeah, I mean, you can bounce around between Maya, Mudbox, whatever you want. When using Maya, you can do the Send To directly into Mudbox. Max works best with export. Export is selected. So, but you can give the Send To directly into Mudbox if you want as new scene. Okay. For this lesson, I'm just going to do export. I'm going to play it safe. I like doing this anyway because then you can actually learn how to export FBX, which is extremely important for design needs and when working as a 3D artist in the industry. So it's always wise to actually do export selected regardless, because, like I said, now we can actually learn how to use the FBX property. And FBX is the one file format that allows you to carry it over into other software, and it also saves it out as an FBX file so you can reopen it any time. You can get back to the state of that format and that model, what it looked like beforehand before you move forward. Because once you keep moving, if you're sending to into other software and it constantly sending to, you're not actually saving anything. So this gives us a little bit more of an advantage as well. I'm going to name this head export just for this lesson. I'm going to save it into my 3ds Max lecture folder, and I'll say head export. Let's name it 1. It's always good to put a number at the end of it. And notice how I'm naming my files. I'm not doing any spaces. I'm doing all lowercase. That's proper naming convention for anything you do in digital graphics. So that's just industry standard. Recommend not using caps or spaces. We hit save. I'm just going to go in and click OK here. Let's go in and click OK. I'm going to open up Mudbox. And when you open up Mudbox, at first glance, it's going to look like this. I'm just going to go ahead and click the X out. You can see you can use sculpt models that are already pre-set up models. If you want to explore these later, you're welcome to. Let's go to click the X feature here and close it out. And I want to bring over my original model. So I'm going to go to File, Import, Lecture folder. I'm going to find that head export FBX, click Open. And I'm going to say keep this mess. And there it is. Now I can use the same controls as I was using in 3ds Max. The middle wheel is rotate, zoom in. The hold Alt key and left click and drag is the rotate around my object here. Okay. The middle mouse wheel, if I push down on the middle mouse wheel, that's my pan. Okay. Looking at this, like I said, the same controls in Mudbox. Holding down Alt key, I can rotate around and so forth. Okay. First is I'm going to go on up, and you'll notice that there's this little icon right here. It's front and right. And I'm going to click on the little home feature, and that's going to allow us to center to the origin. Now notice before I exported out of 3ds Max, I made sure that my head object was positioned around the origin value, okay, of the grid. So back in Mudbox, it came over the exact same way. Scroll forward with my mouse wheel to zoom in, and I push down the middle mouse wheel for pan, and then I'll hold Alt on the keyboard, and then left click and drag across my screen. I can rotate around. Notice I can rotate around my mesh. It's at the very origin of the grid in Mudbox, okay? So it's the exact same controls. Now, if you click on it, you notice it turns yellow. I'm going to go into Select and Move Tools. That's because it's under Object right now, and allows us to actually translate and move the object if we wanted to. We actually don't want to do this because it's going to throw it off back in 3ds Max, but it's good to know that you can take advantage of these control tools here, so I can scale it larger or smaller if I wanted to. I'm going to do Undo, Control Z, or Rotate if I wanted to. I could rotate using the same control parameters. I'm going to go Undo again, Control Z, and translate. I can move things around in Mudbox. So if I only wanted to use Mudbox, Mudbox down the road for modeling purposes, I could, and I could just take advantage of the transform controls here. Back to object. I want to select objects, and I'm going to left click outside to deselect so I get rid of that yellow. Makes it easier to read and see. I'm going to go to Sculpt Tools tab, okay? And in here you're going to notice that we have a lot of different sculpt features that we can utilize for our modeling processes. So I want to click on the sculpt function, and then over here notice that immediately the parameters come open, and you can see size and strength, okay? Now you want to make sure mirror is turned off. It might be by default on X. We don't want to mirror the value. Mirror means if I was to bring in a modeled face or entire character body, by mirroring off a certain axis, it would, whatever I did on one side would reflect on the other. Well, in this case, we only have one side that we're modeling, so we're going to turn mirror off, okay? Size indicates that the brush size. So if I increase this brush size and I'll lower the brush size, notice that now I can actually see my brush. So if it's too large, in this case, it goes outside my my screen, okay? I can zoom out and I can eventually see it. So we want to make sure we bring our brush size down to a good scale before we actually start sculpting in Mudbox. So I'm going to bring it down to, let's say, 2 looks pretty good for my facial design here. Okay, that's going to work. And then my strength indicates how much pressure I want to place into my object. Now, the first thing I want to do before I do anything on my face, I actually want to go on up to Mesh, and I want to say Add New Subdivision Level. Okay? And what that did is it duplicated the polygons across the mesh. This is going to give me more control for the sculpting. I'm going to do it one more time. Recommended doing 2 times, no more than 2. Keep it at 2. The reason being, if you do too much, your computer might not have enough RAM to interpret that many polygons across your mesh, okay? Now, we modeled in quads, okay, those polyquads. So back in 3ds Max, notice that we modeled where all of the polygons across my mesh had 4 sides, okay? And that's exactly what we want, because that's going to make it easiest for sculpting purposes back in Mudbox. Now, this is, even though it's smooth, you can see it's still really rough. Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take advantage of what's called the smooth feature. Okay, so I'm going to activate smooth. I'm going to increase the size a little bit here. And all I have to do, that's too large. Okay, do, let's say 10. All I got to do is left click and drag across my mesh, and it's going to smooth out all these polygons. Get a nice big brush to start with. See that hard crease here on my neck? Easily just smooth and round that out. Much better. I'm going to bring my size down because I don't want to damage my facial design too much. So I'll bring it down to, like, let's say a 3. That looks pretty good. So I left click and drag. Notice what happens to the nose. Everything just kind of rounds out, just like more like human form. I'm going to come down here and just get around the chin. Left click and drag. And you want to do increments. You don't want to do a one swipe. You want to just kind of left click drag, left click drag, left click drag, and just keep kind of making passes across your mesh. Especially the smaller the brush size is, okay? It's going to smooth all these polygons out very nicely. Alright. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to Sculpt. See Sculpt feature? And now if I left click and drag, I'm going to actually, let's say I want to carry this eyebrow out some. And that red basically, based off the strength value. So if I lower the strength, let's say 1 with the size 3 and left click and drag, see how it's not going to pull out so far? And then here's what's really great. Instead of having to switch back to smooth every time, I can hold shift on my keyboard, left click and drag, and I can just smooth it right out. So this gives me even more of an advantage. I'm going to drop the size value. Let's say 1. Let's say I want to come underneath the eye. Get some more details. And then I'll hold shift and I can smooth that out. You're going to realize really quick that Mudbox is becoming your best friend. And it really is. I mean, this is a great software. There's other software like Mudbox, but I prefer Mudbox just in general because it's an Autodesk product. And you can just send to and send from 3D software that Autodesk creates. Now, I'm going to bring out the lip some, then I'm going to hold shift and smooth it down. I'll do the bottom lip. So I'm going to bring that out some. I'll hold shift, I can smooth it down. Now, if I want to, this is all pulling out, if I want to actually send it back, I would click on the invert function. And now, as I left click and drag, it's going to pull the eye in. So I can make indentions. Now, if I did something I didn't enjoy, I can hit Control Z, and I can remove it, okay? So you can do Control Z. Let's bring the nose. I want to reshape my nose. I'm going to take off the invert function. I'm going to left click and drag. I'm going to bring my nostril out, let's say. Because nostrils are really hard to 3D model in general. So I'm going to use Mudbox to my advantage. I'm going to bring the nose out some. Left click, drag, do a few swipes. That looks pretty good. Sculpt it out. And now I'll hold shift and I can smooth it down. And very easy. I just basically created something, really quick, which would take me a lot of time back in 3ds Max trying to actually model that nostril correctly. I'm going to go ahead and do invert and lower the size. Let's say 0.5. I'm just going to left click and drag. I'm going to build the inside of my nostril area. Pretty cool, huh? And I'll hold shift and I'll smooth that out. Looks good. Now I'm using values just for my own purpose. These might be different as it references your models that come in because it all relates to scale. Okay, strength and size and Mudbox will relate to the scale of your head. So or character body when we get there. But right now, notice how large I made my head. If I hit F3 here back in Max, see how big it is in reference to the grid? So you're going to want to make sure you're at least around that size before you bring it over. Go back into Mudbox. I mean, this looks pretty good. Okay, let's say I'm ready, because I could come back anytime. Remember, I don't have to stay over here. It just gives me a better working order. It helps clean up your polys. I'm going to just go ahead and just kind of, let's say I make some indentions there on the side. Yeah, it looks really good. Everything's smoothed out. And I can come back to Mudbox anytime. All right, now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to Select Move Tools, go to Objects. So I'm going to select it so it's yellow. And the first thing I want to do before I send it back is I want to go back to Mesh. I want to say Step Level Down. And I'm going to do that twice. Step Level Down. So now we're back to the basic quads that we started with. And now already looking at it first glance, look at how smoothed out it is. We got more detail on our nose. Everything's more well-rounded out. It looks great. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to File. And here we can actually send to 3ds Max. And I'm going to say Update Current Scene that's back in 3ds Max. You ready? And voila. Look at that. Everything's smoothed out. It's rounded out. It looks great. Wondering, okay, how do I smooth in 3ds Max to see kind of the idea before having to send it to Mudbox all the time, Adam? Well, that's really easy. I'm going to select my head object here. Remember, it's named head. And I'm going to go to the modify list now. So under the modify panel, I'm going to click this drop tab, and it's going to allow me to grab a list from a list of modifiers. Specifically, I like to use Mesh Smooth. There's another one you can try out. It's called Turbo Smooth. They do pretty much the same thing. But I'm going to do Mesh Smooth, add this modifier, and notice the alliterations. I'm not going to go above 2, remember, but I can boost up to 2, and it's going to give me what it looks like if it was smoothed out before I rendered out my character animation. Now I can turn this on and off at any time, so I can turn it off or turn it back on and get more of an idea of what the smooth property is going to look like. Okay? Now, one thing you do not want to do, lesson 1 in modeling, is never ever convert this object to a poly with a modifier active. Make sure you turn it off before you convert, and then that way it maintains the low poly quads. See how the modifier became part of that mesh? Where if I was to add this mesh smooth or any modifier from my list that I'm using in 3ds Max, and I was to right click and convert to poly, now that modifier becomes part of the poly, and I have too many polygons to work with. That is totally incorrect. And I do not want to save it like this. So I'm going to do Control Z. I'm going to get back to what it was. So what I like to do purposely is either you could turn it off, but to be 100% safe, notice I could select that modifier and I could come down here. Whoops. And I could click the trash can and destroy it before I convert it to a poly or mesh. Okay, moving forward. Be sure you stay in low poly. Okay? Do not, under any circumstances, mesh smooth and then convert in 3ds Max. Even when you're animating later down the line and you're animating your character, the very last thing you do before you render your scene is add one of these smooth modifiers. That way you're actually animating low poly, you're conserving RAM for your 3D modeling or animation needs, okay? So mesh smooth is actually the last modifier you would apply before you even render your out your scenes for animation purposes. But I can get a good idea using mesh smooth and understanding what it's going to look like smoothed out, and it helps. Okay, in 3ds Max. However, I like to delete it, and you can bounce out, and you can reapply it at any time. So if I want to go back, add it again, there it is. Keep in mind that you can go to my LinkedIn page at linkedin.com if you would like to link up with me and have me as a resource and a reference in your list of contacts. You can send me a message at my LinkedIn, and that will reach out to my Yahoo email, hence my Gmail accounts, and I can always be there to help you. Thank you for watching, and look forward to working with you.